afternoon, everybody. Hope you are all keeping well and happy. We are going to give it a couple of minutes and maybe start at 3 minutes past. So get your cup of tea or coffee, relax, and we will start at 3 minutes past. All right, afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. We are grateful to have you here with us today. My name is Daniela Borges. I'm a corporate account manager at Kaelo. I'm joined by Tracy Helps, who's a clinical consultant and a social worker by trade. She's going to be taking us through optimizing health through behavioral change. We're going to have a couple of polls and Slidos through the session, so keep your phone handy. Otherwise, sit back, enjoy the session. We'll be manning the chat box if you've got any questions. And see you on the other side. Thanks, Trace.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks for the introduction as always, and thanks for having me with you again today. And thanks for highlighting that I have August on the slide. So I'm just going to acknowledge that before everyone jumps in the chat box and tells me that I am 2 months behind. I do frequently wonder how we got to the middle of October already. So perhaps that's why it still reflects on August. So my apologies for that. It is October. Welcome to the October webinar. And we're going to be talking about optimizing health behavior change. So optimizing health through behavior change. And this is, I guess, really the crux of health. I was saying to Danny a couple of days ago when we were prepping that we all know we're not supposed to smoke and we're supposed to sleep properly and we're supposed to eat properly and we're meant to exercise. We all know this. But actually changing those behaviors is really the very crux of creating that optimum wellness. So this, I suppose, is the topic in terms of creating our proper wellness. So we're going to have a look at understanding that cycle of change, what it looks like and how we engage with it. We're going to work with some of our own behaviors, and Danny and I will share our own experiences as well and lay ourselves vulnerable and bare in terms of our bad habits as well. And then we're going to focus a bit on relapse prevention, which obviously, again, is the crux of this. The whole idea of changing your behavior is to keep it changed, is to maintain that change and not to revert back to relapse and back to the old behavior. So that's what we're going to have a look at over the next hour or so. And as Danny mentioned, we will stop for questions and interaction and conversation all the way through. As a starting point, I'd like you to just take a moment, reflect on your life, reflect on what's working, perhaps what's not working so well, and what are the behaviors that you would like to change. You're either going to want to eliminate a behavior, so take something out, like smoking perhaps, or maybe you've got really bad stress management things that you were doing, like watching tons and tons of TV and being really sedentary, or you're going to want to put something in. Maybe you want to add exercise, you want to add some mindfulness or meditation, you want to add more water. So you're either eliminating something or you're including something. Perhaps there's one of each that you'd like to work on today. Just a proviso, or perhaps a reminder, a flag to all of us that this is not necessarily as black and white as it seems. So sometimes a behavior on the face of it might be really positive, like exercise or like eating really healthily. But at some point that can also cross over into a very unhealthy relationship with something like exercise. If you're exercising in a nurturing way, in an appropriate amount, when you're sick or injured, you stop and you rest and you recover, that's fantastic. But if you're exercising in a punitive way because you're driven by really low self-esteem and you're trying to lose weight in really unhealthy ways, or you're excessively exercising at the risk of illness and injury, then obviously it's crossed that line. So we need to also just build some insights into our actual relationships with these behaviors. The same as food. Eating healthily obviously is what we're all supposed to be doing, but that can get to a place where we're over-restricting, where we are so rigid and so controlled that we can't occasionally enjoy ourselves in appropriate ways. So there's a moderation element here that we need to be bearing in mind. And it's sometimes quite easy to cross over into an extreme behavior, even with the so-called positive behaviors, and that's never helpful. So we're obviously going to have a look at these behaviors and how we move through these various stages of change. So while I'm doing that, you can hold that behavior in your mind. And broadly speaking, and I'm going to drill down into this in more detail when we go through the actual stages of change in that health cycle, but we go through 4 broad phases, if you will, in terms of changing our behavior. The first of those is denial, and this is an incredibly powerful phenomenon that happens in lots of different psychological spaces, but it really does happen a lot in the space of behavior change, habit, addiction. Certainly, we pretend that what is so isn't so, and we make up a whole bunch of excuses and reasons and justifications, and many of those are quite valid sometimes. So denial might be things like overweight because of my genetics. It's got nothing to do with the slab of chocolate that I eat every night and the fact that I don't exercise. So we kind of have arguments that sometimes we can justify. If you look at my family we're all big people. I can look at my genetics and I can go, I didn't get the skinny card. But I've also got to look at the same time at my behaviors and my habits. So that denial is not your friend. And we need to really get to our truth on any of these issues. How we break that denial for yourself or anybody around you for that matter is we look at the consequences of the behavior. What are the consequences? If we talk about, let's continue my example. If we talk about weight and how we eat and our food choices, we can go, okay, what are the consequences? I feel bad about myself. I don't feel comfortable in my clothes. I have to keep buying new clothes. I feel self-conscious when I'm around people. My self-esteem is impacted. I'm a poor role model to my children, and so on and so forth. What are the consequences of the behavior? If you're struggling to break that denial and get to a place where you're actually recognizing, okay, this has to change, write down those consequences. And I'd encourage you to do it now. And often it's not the big ones. Often it's not the doctor saying, okay, you're actually morbidly obese, and if you don't lose weight, you're going to have a heart attack. Sometimes those aren't the ones that do it for us. Often it's the smaller ones. Our children saying, Mom, like, you're a bit embarrassing, or like watching them eat or exercise or sleep in unhelpful ways because they're copying you. Sometimes it's those smaller consequences that actually hit much closer to home. Once you've broken that denial, you're quite likely to get to a place of resistance. And that resistance is, why should I have to? It's not fair. Why can my friend eat 3 slabs of chocolate a day and she's skinny and I have 1 a day and I'm not? Like, it's not fair. It's not right. It's too hard. I don't want to. I don't know how to. I shouldn't have to. So all these points of resistance come up because change is hard work. It requires big commitment. It takes time and energy and resources, and we don't want to do it. We would rather not have to do it. So we find all these ways to resist it. And then we start to explore. What would our life be like if we did make this change? If things did change, if we were different, if the outcomes were different, what might that feel like? What would it look like? And that's where we're starting to find some kind of commitment to making a change. And then obviously we get that commitment, which is the ultimate, okay, I'm going to do this, let's do it. And you'll see as I get into more detail around the cycle of change is that very often we jump straight to commitment. I'm going to start eating better, and I go and I buy a trolley full of, grilled chicken and lettuce and cucumber and quinoa and all these healthy things. And I have a fridge stacked to the brim of healthy food, and I've made a commitment, but I haven't done the work. I haven't done the emotional, psychological, social, practical work to maintain that commitment. And that's part of why we see that relapse so much. So we've got to work through these changes in some detail and with a lot of honesty, a lot of self-reflection before we're able to genuinely make that commitment. So the health behavior change looks like this. We start at the top there with the pre-contemplation at the very top of the cycle, and I'm going to go through these each one by one in some detail in a minute. And we move through contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. And we can go around and around and around in this loop many, 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 many times if we're not able to get it right. But I'm going to go through that detail in just a minute. What I would like you to do as a starting point, and while you do this, I want to take some questions, is identify which health behavior would you like to change. So you can just go along to silo.com, put in that little hashtag and the 800-210 number, or scan that QR code. It'll take you to the same place, and you'll be able to answer this question. Reminding you that it's completely anonymous. I can't see who's answering or what you're answering. Nobody can see what you're answering. So please feel safe and free to go ahead and talk about what behavior you would like to change. If I talk about my own behaviors, it's definitely my relationship to chocolate after dinner when my kids have gone to bed on the couch in front of the TV. It's definitely my relationship to sleep. As soon as I'm under pressure or stress, I just stop going to bed and I need to drink some more water. So for me, it's easy to pick up those kind of three straight away. Okay, any questions at this point? Anyone want to ask a question? I know Danny's manning that chat box. Anything going on in there, Danny?
Currently pretty quiet, Trace, but I will let you know if there are any that come up.
Okay, then I can put you right on the spot. Which health behavior would you be seeking to change?
I think for me, Trace, it's after dinner every single night. My partner and I sit on the couch, watch TV, and have to have some sort of snack. We have to have a chocolate or, and it's never healthy. I mean, never. All our intention is to have,
it's never carrots.
So much easier to just have biscuits without tea or chocolate. I think that would be mine.
Okay, yeah, you guys are my people. I mean, my husband and I do the exact same thing, and it's really such a bad habit in so many different ways at that time of day. So I can certainly identify with you. That's kind of after dinner, house is warmed down, kind of snacking. Not a great habit. Okay, but let's look at what people are saying. So smoking is coming up as the most common thing people want to change, and we know that smoking and being sedentary are two of the most damaging things we can do for ourselves. But good eating habits is coming up a lot, exercising more, healthy eating, more sleep, lots of exercise coming up, and lots of relationship to foods. I can see stress eating, I can see eat less meat, drinking. I'm assuming that's drink more water, perhaps it's drink less alcohol. Not sure. I did see another alcohol pop up there somewhere. So lots of different behaviors that we want to be able to focus on. I see that smoking is still the most popular. I also see vaping on the list there. So perhaps that's one that I can use as an example as I go through. I'm going to give you a couple more minutes just to get these answers up, because I'm hoping that declaring this publicly, even though we don't know who you are, is a part of the commitment that you're making to yourself. And you can really start to build a smart goal around this behavior change as we go through this conversation this morning. You can start to build some goals for yourself. Okay, Danny, any questions coming in there?
Trace, just more commenting on the slider, I suppose. People are saying that they would like to eat healthier, do more exercise. Sleep seems to be quite a big trend as well. I see from the slider and the comments as well, people wanting to sleep more. It's difficult to wake up if you haven't had a good night's sleep. So somebody put here, they eat too much cheese every day. It's quite licorice, needs to eat less licorice. Yeah, but no questions per se.
Great, and those are wonderfully specific. You know, there's great value in being so specific. Brilliant. Well, thank you everybody for sharing. 54 of you have participated, which is amazing. So I'm going to move us on, but thank you for sharing. And I hope that as we go through, you're able to work on this behavior live today as we go through this. And please feel free to drop the questions. If any of this doesn't make sense, or you'd like to ask a question specific to your behavior or your behavior change that you're struggling with, please go ahead and do that. Great. All right, so let's have a look at this cycle, because when we understand this, it really can be helpful in terms of getting our minds around making and maintaining these behavior changes. So we start with pre-contemplation, which is a bit of a useless step really, because it's before we're aware of any kind of problem. So any of you who have identified a behavior are not in pre-contemplation, because you already know that behavior is a bit of a problem. But pre-contemplation is when we are merely carrying on, completely oblivious to the fact that something is causing us problems. We might not be experiencing consequences yet, and we are just smoking or not sleeping or drinking tons of caffeine or whatever we're doing, and we're just not aware yet that it's a problem. So we have zero intention at this point to change that behavior. Then at some point, we shift into contemplation. And this is where we're starting to realize, okay, this behavior is a problem. It's bringing me consequences. Perhaps people around you are complaining about it or are expressing concern about it. Maybe you drink too much alcohol, or you're using sleeping tablets too often, or you've gained a lot of weight and it's becoming a concern around your health. People might be starting to flag that, doctors, dentists, your family, your friends, or you're seeing it in yourself. It's hard to get up in the morning, or you're feeling sluggish and demotivated, whatever it is, but you're starting to see those consequences and to feel the negative impact on your life. And you're thinking, okay, perhaps it's time to look at this behavior. The thing with contemplation is that you could contemplate changing your behavior for a decade or 2 or 3. And I'd love you to drop in the chat box, how long have you been contemplating changing the behavior? If we talk about something like smoking, people often talk about stopping smoking for 10 years before they make any actual movement towards doing that in a sustainable way. I've been saying for 15 years that I've really got to stop eating chocolate every night. Like, you know, we can contemplate for a long time. But this is really where we're starting to do the emotional work around, okay, this behavior's got to go. Even though I quite like it, the cost of the behavior, the consequences are starting to outweigh the benefits. And then we move into the first really important phase of this whole cycle, and that's preparation. And if you hear me say anything today at all, it needs to be what I'm about to say now. Preparation and maintenance are by far the most important phases of this cycle. We make the mistake of focusing on action. Action is just one action. In and of itself, it actually means nothing. Preparation and maintenance are where successful behavior change is at. What we are doing when we get this right is we are preparing to maintain the behavior change. It's very easy to stop doing something. You can stop smoking. That's easy. There you go. Cigarettes are down. I've stopped smoking. But can you stay stopped? That's a very different thing. I cannot eat chocolate tonight. That's possible. But what about tomorrow night? Staying stopped is a whole different story. So if we are properly preparing, we are preparing to maintain the behavior change. I hope that makes sense. And just to cite some pretty interesting research that I'm sure many of you will be able to relate to, is I hope you're old enough to remember that series called The Biggest Loser. It was all over the world and it was a whole big thing. And if you didn't see it, what they did is they put a whole bunch of people who were very overweight into a house that was a kind of early days reality TV show. And they put them all into this house and they gave them incredibly healthy food and all the right doctors and incredible personal trainers. And all they did was basically sleep, eat really healthily, and exercise for this period of time. And they lost radical amounts of weight. The research post Biggest Loser, though, is that most of those people gained back their weight. It's in excess of 85% of them gained back the weight that they had lost. And most of them, out of the 85%, gained more than they had come into the original competition with in the first place. So when we look at something like that, we know that that's because they didn't prepare to maintain. They took a radical action, but there was no preparation and there was no preparing to maintain. And that's why it fails. And it'll fail every single time if we don't prepare to maintain. Now, what does that look like? What does preparing to maintain mean? What does that look like? It's really about learning about the existing behavior and the new behavior. If you want to stop smoking, maybe read some books around what does that look like? Why is it so difficult? What is the psychology and the neurology of smoking? If you want to drink more water, understand why that's important, understand why it's hard to do that. So educate yourself on the existing behavior and the desired new behavior. So you really are empowered with knowledge in that particular space. We have to identify and secure help. It's very difficult to change behaviors. It's extraordinarily difficult to change behaviors. We need help. It's almost impossible to do this in a vacuum. If you're trying to stop smoking, but your partner is smoking, so difficult. If you're trying to stop snacking, but your partner is snacking, so difficult. So we have to identify and secure that help. That means find a mentor, find a counselor, join a support group, engage in Ask Nelson counseling and or coaching. Get into the Facebook and social media groups, of which there are so many to support these things. Join Alan Carr or Smoke Enders. There's so many groups that you can join, support groups, virtual and in person, counselors, Ask Nelson, so many platforms that you can use to secure that kind of help, because you're going to need it. Even just a mentor, somebody who's done this before, who has managed to lose the weight or train for the Comrades Marathon or has stopped smoking, whatever it is, someone who's done that, get a mentor. So we've got to secure that help, or it's going to be very difficult. We've got to set some goals, and SMART goals obviously are really helpful. Is the goal specific? If we say things like, I want to be healthier, it's too vague. What does that mean? I want to lose weight. Okay, how much? And why? Like, what is the motivation for you? Because you're going to need to draw on that motivation. Is the goal measurable? Is it attainable? Is it realistic? Is it time sensitive? Do you know in which time period you want to achieve it? So set a really specific SMART goal around the desired behavior. And then you need to have a way to be accountable to that, to track that, to monitor it, to assess it and evaluate it if it's not working and change it. So there's a lot of preparation. If we just say, I'm going to eat healthily, okay, what does that mean? Because we could start banting, you could go straight carb free, you could try keto, you could go vegan or vegetarian. Like, what does that mean? So you've got to educate yourself in all of that space and set some real specific goals and ways to track that. Then you've got to get practically ready. And this is the basic stuff. If I want to start exercising, but I don't have any tackies or gym membership, or I haven't signed up for an online yoga class or whatever it is, how am I going to exercise? If I don't have lettuce and chicken in my fridge, how am I going to eat healthily? So we've got to prepare practically. Do we have what we need available to us to actually maintain this behavior? And then we have to do a lifestyle audit, and this is going to come up again later, so I'm not going to focus on it now. And the distraction list, I'll talk about these again when we get to relapse prevention, but these two things are really important, and we prepare for them now before we even take the action. And then once that preparation is done, and that could take days, weeks, maybe even months, but probably weeks, to get yourself really properly prepared. Then the action, as you can see, is really simple. We just apply the preparation. Action is the most basic of all of these phases, and it's never-endingly frustrating that we keep putting focus on the action, and then it doesn't work, and then we have another experience of failure in terms of changing our behavior, and we get more and more stuck. So forget the action, prepare properly, and then maintain properly. Once you've made that behavior change, you're going to maintain. That means daily accountability. Are you going to check in with a mentor or a support group or a Facebook group or an Ask Nelson counselor? How are you going to have that accountability to yourself and those around you in terms of the behavior change? Do you have buddies and mentors and support groups who can say, hang on, you're slipping a little bit, we need to get back on track, the old thinking is coming back? Do you have those people in place? Do you have the goal in place? Do you have a constant vigilance? And that's almost like an observance of yourself. So as you go through the day, stopping every hour or every kind of quarter in the day and saying, have I drunk the water I was supposed to drink in the last 2 hours, or haven't I? Because you get to the end of the day and you haven't been mindful of that at all, now suddenly you can't catch up on the behavior change. So you've got to have that constant observance of yourself. And it's really helpful to use reminders on your phone or your laptops. It's helpful to attach new behaviors to your existing routine. So at breakfast, when you commute, when you get to your desk, when you take lunch, when you commute, when you get home, like attach behaviors to those existing triggers in your day. Or use apps. There's an app for almost everything. There's a water drinking app. There's a whatever app you need. So use those to track the behavior. But we need the accountability, and we've got to have that vigilance. And then we've got to manage our stress, because lots, not all, but lots of these behaviors are driven by stress. We eat when we're stressed, or we eat to kind of come down. We drink too much alcohol. We take too many sleeping tablets. We spend too much money because we're frustrated and bored. Lots of these behaviors are driven by poor stress management. When you take away the chocolate or the cigarettes or the alcohol or whatever it is, what are you going to do to manage your stress? That's going to become a big trigger. So we've got to put alternative stress management in place as part of that maintenance. And we've got to prepare for that alternative stress management in the preparation phase. If I'm going to color in stress management, do I have a coloring in book? It's these basic things that unravel us, because we go, okay, I'm not going to eat chocolate. I've got to change my routine. I can't sit on the couch. What am I going to do? Oh, I don't have a puzzle. I don't have any coloring. I don't have anything else to do. And we end up defaulting into old behavior. So I hope you can see how important that preparation to maintain is. Obviously, if we don't effectively maintain, we will relapse into the old behavior, and then we start the whole process again. The problem is that every time you relapse, it gets harder and harder to believe that you can successfully change the behavior. So we don't really want those relapses. In some instances, in the space of drugs and alcohol, relapse can be life-threatening. Smoking even, you're contributing directly to your ill health. So we don't want those relapses to be happening. And also they contribute to that emotional sense of, I'm never going to get this right. So we don't want to relapse. We really want to be able to maintain. But if you do relapse, you simply go back into the cycle and we try again. Okay, I've said an awful lot. I'm going to park us here for a minute. This is a great poem that by far explains this process better than the fancy cycle I've just taken you through. Just take a minute to read this for yourselves. And while you read it, I'm going to allow for any questions there might be, or for Danny to chat to me about her own process. Perhaps in the chat box, you can let me know where you think you are in that cycle of change. Where are you? I know that I'm contemplating and have been doing so never endingly. I am contemplating. Where are you guys in terms of your behaviors and that cycle of change? Danny, any questions, any comments, anything you want me to speak to?
There aren't any questions other than will the slides be posted? So just to confirm in the middle of your story here that you will receive a recording and a toolkit with all the content in the slides in the toolkit after the webinar. Going back to answering your question, Trace, I think I'm probably in the prep stage. The reason I'm saying this is because I always buy healthier things to eat at night. And where the mix-up is coming is I'll take those healthy things to work and eat them at work. And then when I get home, my partner's bought, I don't know, a chocolate, and there we are, eating chocolate again at night. And then it's because it's there, it's available.
Yeah, and you're raising such an important point, Danny. And when we get into the relapse prevention, which I will now pretty much, this really comes up around how do we prevent that relapse? Because basically you're relapsing every night because you're leaving in the morning with the intention of not doing it and then ending up doing it. So basically it's kind of a nightly relapse almost. And such a big part of that is examining, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, how are you getting there? And you've identified so many already. Your partner's buying the chocolate. It's just there, it's available, it's easy, there's no immediate consequence. So when you identify all the things that are allowing the unhelpful behavior, you can start to address them. And that's why the preparation is so important, because if you don't identify all those things that are getting in the way and do something about them, whatever's appropriate, they're always going to be there, and it's going to make the behavior change very difficult and probably not sustainable. So you raise a very good point.
Interestingly, in the chat box, so people are relating the stages to the chapters in the autobiography on the page. A lot of people are coming through saying that they're in chapter 4, which I mean, I think if you reverted back to your cycle, would probably be in the action phase.
Yes, absolutely. So that chapter 4 is saying that we haven't completely changed the lifestyle, but we're avoiding the behavior, which is fantastic, but it's quite exhausting to have to constantly navigate it. So you've got to remember that our neurology is wired for habit. So if I repeat the same thing over and over and over again, I'm building really entrenched pathways for that behavior in my brain. When I stop doing that and I start doing something new, I'm writing a new neural pathway, which over time will become as strong as the old one, but it's not yet. And the risk of going down the old path of the default is always there. So you really want to be able to completely avoid the potential of the default behavior, because it's human nature to default to old behavior. And if I use an example, perhaps to explain that neurology a bit, if we've got a watering hole in the middle of the Kruger Park, right? And you have a drought, like now, I saw 42 degrees in the Kruger Park a couple of days ago, so it's hot and it's dry, and there was a little watering hole. As we all know, they get smaller and smaller, and the animals have been walking to that watering hole for 100 years. And there's a path there that is clear. It's hard. There's no grass or trees or anything growing in that path. The animals walk it every day, and it's a clear road to the watering hole. If a giant tree falls over that path, that existing path, and the animals can't get past, what they're going to do is they're going to start to bushwhack another path, and that's going to be really hard work. They're going to have to, climb over bushes and grass and whatever, and they're going to make a new path, and that's going to be really hard work. At some point, the new path will become as clear as the old path, while the old path grows over. So grass is going to start to grow, and more trees are going to fall over, and bushes are going to get bigger, and the old path is going to slowly become more and more difficult, and the new path is going to become easier and easier. And that's what's happening to our neurology. However, make no mistake, that original path number 1, is always going to be there. If path number 2 becomes blocked, it will be easier to go back to number 1 than it will be to create number 3. That pathway is always there. It's always a possibility of the default behavior. That's why relapse is so easy, because we've wired that habit into our neurology. So ideally, we want to be in chapter 5, where we're going down a different street completely. We've changed the lifestyle. We've removed the triggers. We've dealt with the psychology. We've done all of it so that we aren't confronted with that default behavior, because it's very difficult to sustain it if we're having to navigate it every single time.
And do you think that there's a link between willingness or maybe enough preparation and the actual difficulty of that neural pathway being triggered? And maybe I should give you an example for where this question's coming from. So, if you want to buy a white BMW, and you Google 1 or 2 white BMWs, maybe you see 1 or 2 on the road, and think, okay, cool, that's a cool car. I want to buy that car. All of a sudden, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, there are 1 million white BMWs on the road, and everybody's driving this white BMW that you are looking at buying. That neural pathway is the proverbial bushman's track or buck's track to the water, right? And it's thick now, but because I really, really want that car, the actual happening of that neural pathway thickening didn't take much effort. But if it was, actually, I want to eat fruit instead of my chocolate, I don't know if the willingness is as strong to do that.
Yeah, so when you get excited about something like a white BMW or whatever it might be, those neurons are firing. They're firing all the time because you're thinking about BMWs, you're looking them up on the internet, you're looking for them in the car park, so you're firing down that neural pathway all the time. When you want to eat carrots after dinner, you're not sitting at work going, oh gosh, I can't wait for my carrots. So, you're not exciting that neural pathway, in any kind of the same way as you would be if you were going, oh, there'll be chocolate later. And also we've got to bear in mind that things like chocolate are in and of themselves addictive. Carrots are not. Buying an awesome car gives you a big dopamine spike. So also if we're chasing something that comes with dopamine, then obviously we're more motivated. But those are also often the things that get us into trouble. So carrots don't come with dopamine. 20-year-old cars that are, kind of olive green and scratched up don't give us dopamine. So, we've got to be mindful that there's also a neurological component here. If something is hitting our pleasure centers, like alcohol, cigarettes, chocolate, all of these things, then it makes it even harder because it's almost a double dose. It's a habit, and it's giving you a dopamine hit as well.
I suppose that's why the prep is so important, and understanding where this is coming from, what your goal is in achieving it. That's why it has to happen so much.
Exactly. If you don't prepare, in my view, and this is not the view, but in my view, if you don't prepare, the behavior change will not maintain. It's impossible because you haven't done the emotional, social, financial, practical work to maintain it. So the preparation is hands down the most important phase here.
Agreed.
Okay, are we good? Any other questions? I'm sure you've all read the poem by now and probably agree with me that it's a far better way to understand this whole process than the whole complicated cycle might be. Any other questions in there, Danny?
Good for now. I think we're good for now.
Great. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so let's get to the relapse prevention aspect of this now. And this is part of maintenance. So if we are maintaining a new behavior, so I'm eating carrots and not chocolate, I'm maintaining a new behavior, I am avoiding relapse. Obviously, I'm preventing relapse. So this is very much a part of the maintenance. We separate it out because it's very much its own sort of topic. And it's, like I said right at the beginning, one of the most important elements of this is obviously preventing the relapse because you don't want to go back to the old behavior. It's really hard to create a new one. Why would you want to go back to the old one and have to do it all over again? So we want to avoid these relapses. There's 4 parts of this that are really important. And that's adjusting lifestyle, which is perhaps one of the most important, knowing what your relapse triggers are, being able to identify your warning signs, and then dealing with crisis. And I'm going to go through each of these piece by piece. If we look at the lifestyle, now your lifestyle either supports a new behavior or it doesn't support a new behavior. There's nothing in between. And that lifestyle can be anything from your job, your friends, your hobbies, the sports you play or don't play, all of it, the way you commute, every aspect of our lives makes up our lifestyle. And if you want to really properly prepare and prevent relapse, what you want to do, and remember I said right at the beginning when I saw this in the preparation phase, I said we're going to come back to this as part of preparation, is you want to do a lifestyle audit, which means go through every tiny element of your life, of your week, and identify where the problems are. So if I was doing a lifestyle audit, Danny and I have the same habit, so it's super easy. If I was going to audit that, I'd be like, right, what are the problems? If I look at my chocolate habit in the evenings, the problem is that my husband wants popcorn and he wants Horlicks and then he wants a piece of my chocolate. So he's giving me permission. He's creating an environment that allows for that. He doesn't complain, he doesn't criticize. He almost encourages it because he also wants to do it. So, excuse me, that dynamic of our relationship is a part of the lifestyle. The couch, the TV, my habit of not working so much in the afternoons and being with my kids, and then working at night in front of the couch, in front of the TV, on the couch with chocolate. That pattern of working is part of the lifestyle. So you got to kind of go through every piece of this and go, okay, where are the problems? The behavior either supports or threatens the new behavior. So if you look at that, sitting on the couch and working in front of the TV threatens any new behavior change, because the power of that habit is so intense. When you change behaviors, it might mean that I can't sit on the couch and work in front of the TV. I need to come to my office and work at my desk away from my husband until later on in the evening. Or we need to commit to doing it together or whatever. And there can be different solutions to each part of this, but you got to go through each tiny aspect. One of the habits I used to have was kind of shopping out of the garage shops, the BPs and the Caltex and whatever. And then it's normally expensive and it's garbage. And it was just such a habit. On my way back, drop my kids at school and I'd drive back and I'd buy breakfast and I'd coffee and then I'd carry on. And maybe you've got to change the route that you drive. So you're not going past the Seattle coffee shop. So it's every little aspect of your life. You've got to go, is it supporting or threatening the new behavior? Danny, I'm not sure if you can chip in here, identify anything that you can see as standing out as part of your lifestyle audit, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that committing together really stuck out for me. I think if him and I just sit down and say, this is why we want to not eat chocolate at night. We want to, improve our body image, or we want to just live generally a little healthier. And we both agree and commit to it. It'll make it easier. That said, I also think if you do the commitment internally, and actually stand ground in that even when he does buy chocolates, just say, no, I'm going to get my carrot or whatever it is.
Yes. Great. And then just obviously be mindful of the days of the week. Like Friday evenings, we often think, okay, I deserve a reward after a long, hard day. Or, do you eat garbage in the car while you're commuting? Like, you'll know what your lifestyles look like, but go through them piece by piece and find those snags and get rid of the ones that are going to threaten any new behaviors. Then we have to look at, these triggers, right? Triggers are incredibly powerful things that are going to come. You can't get away from triggers. They're going to be there. But there's different kinds of triggers. There's triggers that I can control, triggers that I cannot control. There's those that I can predict and those that I cannot predict. And then there are triggers that come from inside of myself and from outside. So I can control whether I buy chocolate or not. So if I buy chocolate and I put it in the fridge, that's obviously a trigger. I can't control if my partner buys chocolate or not. That's up to him or her or them. So we can't control that. I can't control going to a birthday party and there being, this massive platter of delicious food. So I can't control that. I can predict it. So I know that if I go to a party and there's a birthday cake or it's a buffet, or that's going to be challenging. So we can predict things, we can control them, we can't control them, and sometimes we can't even predict them. So you're at work and you've made a commitment for the day, you can eat really healthily, and then it's someone's birthday and they bring this amazing supply of cupcakes and donuts. You can't predict that. It blindsides you. So in response to these kinds of triggers, we need to do a couple things. The ones you can control, you need to control. You need to remove them or change them or go around them. You need to work on those triggers. So don't have chocolate in the fridge is obviously the easiest example there, but the ones you can control, remove the triggers. And that might be certain people. If you always drink too much when you're with a certain friend, or you always smoke when you're with a certain friend, you might need to not see that person for a period of time. If you play golf every Saturday and then you get blindingly drunk in the 19th hole, maybe golf needs to go for a while. So triggers come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and sometimes you got to let go of some things, maybe only for a period of time, in order to remove that trigger. The ones that we can't control, we need to decide in advance, how am I going to manage those triggers. And this is, again, part of the preparation. So when my husband sits down tonight and says, please make popcorn and make me a Horlicks, I'm going to have to go, now I feel super resentful, but I knew this was coming. I can predict the trigger. What am I going to do? I'm going to say, okay, make your own, or I'm going to go to the office while you eat that, or whatever. What's my strategy to cope with that trigger? You know, if your trigger is driving past the Seattle, then you're going to drive somewhere else. It's going to remove the trigger. If you end up still going past the Seattle, what am I going to do? Maybe it's about not carrying your bank cards with you, only carrying cash, so you're limiting your spend. There's lots of ways to manage triggers. To declare spending every day often helps with lots of things, because people can see that you've smoked or you've not drunk water because you haven't used money in those ways. So there's lots of ways to manage those triggers. And these are all reasons to reach out to mentors, support groups, counselors, because people have done this, they figured this out. And you want to work this through with somebody who knows how to do this, how to predict and manage triggers. Then you get those that are internal and external. Now, internal is my own anger, boredom, frustration. It's normally an intense negative emotion that triggers us. I know for me, it's frustration. I don't like frustration. I can do angry, I can do bored, I can do sad, I can do all of those things, but frustration does something to me, and I will spend money or eat in response to frustration. I know this about myself. Maybe, Danny, you can tell me what your internal emotional trigger might be.
I think it's stress, I think an unpredictability of what the next day might bring, or, you know, in my job, I manage 90 plus clients, or, you know, varies. And not knowing the next day what's going to happen or who's going to have what issue coming at you, that's a big stress response for me. On the actual day, because of the environment I work in, I'm a corporate account manager for an Ask Nelson program, which a lot of things, you know, there's suicidal people phoning in, and often you're getting involved to try and help sort this situation out. Those things are huge triggers for me. And outside of that, the ones, you know, when I get home, the fact that there is chocolate available is probably another. You know, so for me, if I look at this, I definitely want to focus on my internals. I mean, I can't just remove my partner. That's because he eats chocolate. That's not an option for me. So I think for me, it's going to be focusing on, okay, these are triggers for me. What are other ways that I can use to manage them better, or how else can I manage them better?
Yes, and you've alluded to internal ones there around your own stress, and also external ones around what clients present, or, you know, the chocolate in the fridge. Those are all external triggers. So it's helpful to obviously be mindful of internal and external, and then with those external ones, which ones can we control, can't we control, etc., etc. So you can see there's a fair amount of prep work, of psychology work here that needs to be done if you are genuinely going to be ready to take that action and then to maintain that action. Okay, so if we move on again, we're still talking about relapse. What are your triggers? And I'd like you to just take a moment to really think about this. Is it big celebrations? You know, things like Christmas and New Year, and when people break fast and Ramadan, you know, often we default in those moments. It's not just the negative moments, the stress. It's a Friday night after work. We drink too much, we eat too much, we spend too much money. It's Christmas and New Year and birthdays. It's dinner parties. It's having money or not having any money. You know, like lots of these different things are triggers. Working in a stressful environment or underworking, certain things that we see on screens or we hear. So what are your triggers? You really want to build a very clear list of internal and external, can control, can't control, can predict, can't predict, so that you can start to work solutions for each of those triggers. Or if you can't avoid it, what are you going to do about it when you get triggered? So just give some time to thinking about what are those triggers. And I'd love you to share that with us. And I'll pause here, allow you to do that. As always, just put in that slido.com and the number, or just scan the QR code. And in the meantime, I'm hoping there's some questions in that box for me, or Danny and I can keep pulling apart her psychology while you answer this question.
Tracy, I think you made a good point about being mindful of what the external and internal triggers are, and actually just knowing what those triggers are point blank. Charmaine left a comment here saying, I think one of the hardest things is, one of the hardest parts is parking the things that you can't control. So your external triggers, and that it's along the journey of acceptance. And she's 100% right. Knowing what it is that triggers you, and actually in that moment saying to yourself, this is an external trigger, this is what my next action is going to be, is the difference.
Absolutely. And actually, the trigger is not making you, my husband eating popcorn is not making me do anything. I am empowering the trigger. And if I disempower the trigger with strategies, then it has no thinking with what we can control and can't control. Personally, I'm going through a very frustrating period in my life right this minute. I'm very frustrated. I can't control. It's where I am at now. I have to learn to do different things with the frustration. So, it's exactly as that person contributed. Sometimes you have to learn that we just can't control it and we have to let it go. So many answers coming in here now. Financial stress, being tired, female cycles, menstruation, huge emotional triggers, lack of control, too much work. I've seen a couple of too much works and work stress coming in here. Let me just pull it back to the beginning. Anything else happening in the chat box, Danny?
There was one. Lily asked, does saying no to ourselves seem like deprivation? So no to that chocolate, for example.
Yes and no. So there's a lot of research around a diet mentality. So forgive me for using food all the time, but it's the easiest example to work. If we have a diet mentality or a restrictive mentality that's very rigid, that is very difficult to maintain because it's actually not realistic. So if we always say no, if we never allow ourselves that chocolate or that milkshake or whatever it is, or we never allow ourselves to miss a day of gym, then it's probably not that we're going to maintain that behavior, because we are human and life is so, and I do want to have a piece of cake at my friend's birthday party, and I do want to have chocolate, occasionally. So this is about sustainability. What we tend to do is we either say yes to everything. So it's yes to chocolate every night, or it's no to chocolate every night. And neither of those two things are healthy or sustainable. Somewhere in the middle is sustainable, where we have a lifestyle that supports our health and our wellness, that occasionally allows for us to go to bed really late, or to drink too much alcohol because we're at a party, or to eat a chocolate because we want to, or someone's birthday party, or whatever it is. So yes and no. Too many no's will feel restrictive and punitive, and you will feel deprived. And that's why diets don't work, because people feel deprived and they get resentful, and then you just want what you can't have. And it sets up this big craving almost. And then we have this thing called abstinence violation that comes in. So I'm on diet in the proper traditional sense of that word, and I'm saying no to everything nice. And I feel resentful and probably hungry emotionally and physically, and I feel deprived, and all of those things are going on for me. Now, you can all relate to this, right? No one likes living on boiled chicken and lettuce, nobody. So you feel deprived and resentful and hungry and angry and all these things. And then you go to that birthday party and you have that piece of cake. And what happens is, because your whole body is now feeling deprived, it goes more. And then you have 5 pieces of cake. And then you go, to hell with it. And then the whole day is gone, and you eat a whole bunch of garbage, or you drink a whole bunch of alcohol, or whatever the behavior is. And that's abstinence violation. And then you're back at square one. What is much healthier and far more sustainable is to build it in. So unless you are an addict, then this answer does not apply. If you're an alcoholic, you cannot have one drink, right? But if you're not an addict, you're just trying to change your behavior, then it's far healthier to have 1 or 2 chocolates a week. So to say on a Sunday and a Friday, and you build it into a sustainable life plan. So you are saying yes appropriately, because then you don't have the deprivation and the resentment and all of that. You can say, I will say yes at occasions, but then you must define that occasion, because otherwise every evening becomes an occasion. It's hot, it's an occasion. It's cold, it's an occasion. So we have to define what an occasion is then. But saying yes appropriately is sustainable, which is the whole goal here. Hope I answered that question.
Yeah, very much so. I think another one, Tracy, is what if habit is the trigger? So what if
Yeah.
Waking up and having a cigarette with your coffee is
Yes. Habit is always a trigger, by the way, and that's about the neural pathways. So if I wake up every single morning and I get out of bed and I go have a cigarette outside, I've done that every morning for 10 years. My body is wired. I'm not making a conscious choice. It's like driving a car. I'm not choosing my gears. I'm just driving because I've done it 1,000 times. So your body just does that automatically. You're not making a deliberate, mindful choice, if that makes sense. So habit is always a trigger. And what you want to do, and this is why something like smoke enders work so well with smoking, is because it breaks the habit. So it'll say things like, don't smoke in the car, don't smoke after a meal, don't smoke first thing in the morning. So it breaks the habit. It changes between which, I hope you can see me, like if you smoke like this, it makes you smoke like that, which is uncomfortable. So it's breaking those neurological habits, because habit's always a trigger. So what you can do for yourself is you put things in that break that habit. So if you're getting up in the morning and you're having a cigarette, what else can you do? You can get up in the morning and you can immediately put a TED talk on, or you can do a mindfulness exercise, or you can walk around the block, or you can, there's so many options. You've got to put something else in that breaks that habit. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it all comes down to being mindful that it is a trigger, and this is my plan. This is the trigger. This is my plan.
Yeah. It's mindfulness of the plan, knowing what those triggers are, and a new lifestyle.
Yeah.
Without the new lifestyle, this becomes near impossible. And that new lifestyle is getting up in the morning and turning on a TED talk rather than having a cigarette. That is lifestyle. So the lifestyle either supports or threatens the new behavior.
100%.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you all for sharing that. I saw lots of work stress. I love that FOMO. I have the world's greatest problem with FOMO. It's the butt of endless jokes in my family that I will be drop dead exhausted, but still will not want to miss out. FOMO definitely also a relapse trigger for me. So thank you all for sharing so honestly. Okay, getting towards the last two issues, and I am mindful of our time. I might be stealing an extra 5 minutes from you. Looking at these warning signs. Warning signs are the things that tell you you're sliding into relapse. And it's normally when that dialogue starts in your own brain. I'm entitled to a chocolate. I deserve it. What harm will one do? When we start to negotiate is probably one of the biggest warning signs. But these warning signs happen in our behaviors, our thinking, our feeling, and our attitudes. So behaviors, we change our routines, we drop our routine, we step back from support, we break our accountability, we isolate so nobody sees the relapse. In the thinking space, we start to justify, we start to blame. If work wasn't so hard, I wouldn't have to have the extra glass of wine. Our thinking goes is probably one of the biggest warning signs. We start to feel entitled, that we deserve the celebration, that we're rewarding ourselves. And that rewarding is why Alan Carr is so good in terms of smoking, because he talks about why do we perceive smoking as a reward? And the same applies to sugar. We're doing something that is fundamentally bad for ourselves, that is actually shortening our lifespan, but we're viewing it as a reward. So often we have to work the psychology and go, hang on, I need to reward myself differently. And if I slip back into thinking that those things are a reward, that's a warning sign. And then attitudinally, we often become defensive and avoidant, and we step back from people who tell us the truth, and we step back from spaces that are uncomfortable because we want to go back to the old behavior. So these are your warning signs. And if we don't see these warning signs, we will obviously relapse. When you see these warning signs, it's your chance to go, okay, this is not going so well. I need to tighten this up. I need to get more support, or deal with the triggers better, or prepare some more, or I need to do something extra. so that I don't fall back into relapse. And then we look at some real crisis management strategies here. And this is when you're sitting, there's that picture somewhere in the presentation with the guy with the plate, with the apple and the cake. And this is now where we're in crisis management. And we're going, I can drink the bottle of wine, I can smoke the cigarettes, I can eat the whole slab of chocolate, or I can do something else. When we're in that moment, what can we do about it? And what we can do is we can play the movie forward. And what that means is, what's next? So I eat the slab of chocolate. Now I violated my abstinence. So now it's open season. I'm probably going to eat badly for a while. Then I'm going to have to pull that back. That's excruciatingly painful. I'm going to feel embarrassed, ashamed of myself. I'm going to add to my sense of failure. It's harder to stop every time. So what are the consequences? What comes next? Play the whole movie. We tend to just play the highlight reel. Oh, nice chocolate, yum. And we don't play the rest. So play the whole movie forward. We need to leave or change the environment. If you're triggered and you're about to default into old behavior, it normally helps to leave the environment. If I leave the lounge, I'm not going to eat popcorn. Simple as that. So often we need to leave environment or change the environment to get away from the pressure. You need to get help. And that's why having support groups, especially on platforms like social media, or being able to phone and ask Nelson counselor at 10 at night and say, I'm about to inhale a slab of chocolate. That's a good reason to phone and ask Nelson counselor. Get that help. Let them talk you through it. The feeling will pass in about 20 minutes if we're able to get that kind of help. We have to be able to distract ourselves. And a part of preparation is writing a distraction list. And the distraction list is anything that you can do other than the behavior. It's reading a book, watching a movie, listening to a TED talk, it's coloring in, it's meditating, it's mowing the lawn, it's clearing out the garage, it's walking the dog, it's playing with the kids, doing a tax return. It's all of those things. When you prepare properly, you write a distraction list, and then you make sure all those things are accessible to you. If you're going to color in, do you have coloring in? If you're going to walk the dog, do you have a dog? Like, does the dog have a lead? Are you prepared to do what's on the distraction list? So write that list, and then it sits there on the fridge. And when you really want to eat the chocolate or smoke the cigarette or stay up all night, you do what's on that list to distract yourself out of that default behavior. And you got to monitor your thinking. We can either talk ourselves up or down from a behavior. If I want the chocolate, I can go, what's one more chocolate? It's not going to make a difference to my weight. I'm already overweight. I can go, entitled to it. I deserve it. Everyone else does it. What's the harm? We can talk up that feeling. I want it. I deserve it. Or we can talk it down. I've made a commitment. I've chosen a new behavior. I know what the consequences are of this behavior. And if you can't remember the consequences, write them down. A great thing to do is to have a list. This is what the chocolate makes me feel. I feel helpless, useless. I feel unhealthy. I feel like a failure. My self-worth. Write down those consequences. So when the chocolate looks like a good idea, pull those consequences out and go, hang on a second. I changed the behavior for a very good reason. Do I really want to have this slab of chocolate? And invite this all back into my life. So only you can monitor whether you're talking something up or talking it down. So check in with that, and then use the distraction list, use the list of consequences, use all of those things to help bring yourself back down. The good news, and this is my last slide, I'm aware of time, and for those of you that stayed on the line, thank you so much. The good news is that it's not this hard forever. We go through 4 phases of change. When something is unconscious and unhelpful, so we're merely hoovering slabs of chocolate and nobody cares. Then it becomes conscious, and this is also the contemplation phase, where we know it's unhelpful, we know it's bad for us, and we're conscious of that, and it's really uncomfortable, even maybe painful. And then we take an action, and then we're in a new behavior, and we've got to be super conscious and observant and have the accountability and the mentors and all these things. And it's a helpful behavior, but it's exhausting because it's so conscious. At some point, the new behavior becomes as unconscious as the old behavior was. And that's like the neural pathways. At some point, the new path the animals walk to the watering hole is as open and clear and easy to use as the old path was, and the old path grows over. So there will come a time where the new behaviors become automatic. We just have to get there. The new behavior will become habitual We just have to do it enough times to make it habitual. So you'll get there. You just got to go through the discomfort in the meantime. Thank you all so much. I think I'll hand over to Danny to just remind you of Ask Nelson and let you know about the really exciting webinar coming up next month, which I'm definitely going to sign up for. But thank you so much, and I'll stay on the line for any questions that there are, but I'll hand over to Danny just to wrap us up in the meantime.
Thanks, Tracy. Such an insightful webinar. The thanks coming through on the chat box about how insightful and woke your presentation was really stands out. So thank you so much. We really do appreciate it.
I thought I was too old to be called woke, so I appreciate that.
For anybody who was triggered by this conversation or just wants to chat to somebody, please feel free to reach out to Ask Nelson. Within Ask Nelson is a team of counselors, social workers, coaches, and psychologists as well. They can help you with counseling, coaching. We've also got financial advice and legal advice services on our platform. To reach out to us, Tracy, if you could flick to the next slide. If you are within South Africa or Africa, or outside of South Africa, within Africa, there are different contact details. You can contact us at 0861 635 766. If you do still have a phone that has the alphabet on the numbers, then 0861 Nelson. It's worthwhile to save the number to reach out to us. I have put a link in the chat box for our next webinar. Our next webinar is going to be on men's mental health. Our facilitator is Tracy Nichols. He is a business strategist, facilitator, mentor, coach. He's got a long CV, including author, a wealth of knowledge. So really looking forward to it. I'll pop the link on where you can register for this webinar in our chat box as well. Outside of this, thank you so much for attending. Always great to see everybody and get the very entertaining comments. Thank you, Rocco. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and we will see you next month in the next one. Thank you, Tracy.
My pleasure. Take care, everybody. Bye.